State of California is now meeting in regular session. Only those items that indicate a specific time will be heard at the assigned time. All items may be taken out of context or taken out of sequence, to accommodate public and staff availability. We'll call the meeting to order at 3:30 and Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Gastineau, would you please lead us? Okay, Karen, would you please take the roll?
Commissioner Gastineau?
Here.
Commissioner Hawley?
Here.
Commissioner Wilson?
Here.
Noting for the record that Commissioner Sullivan is absent at this time, and Chairman Gitlin?
Here. Thank you very much. Okay, I see it is 3:30. We will go to public comments. Any member of the public may address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter on or off the agenda. After receiving recognition from the chair, please give your name and address for the record. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and if you are in fact speaking on a subject that is on this agenda, you may do so, but then you will not speak when the agenda item comes up at the time. So if you wish to speak on that particular agenda item, you may want to wait until it's coming up. So Mr. Miles, you want to come up?
Mr. Gitlin, as the chair of this body, have you ever taken any time to read the Public Resource Code that deals with solid waste or any part of that action? There's many parts to it. I'm just asking, have you looked at any of that body of the resource code that was established by law?
Are you asking me a question rhetorically, or are you asking me to respond during your 3 minutes? I'm not sure what you're...
I'd like a response myself.
I've read a number of things. What are you specifically referring to? What are you specifically referring? I read as much as I can get my hands on. Mr. Miles, what are you referring to?
The Public Resource Code.
I can't say I remember reading. I've read, it could be, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to beg off that question.
I would hope that you would take some time and go online to the state codes and read that section of the resource code. And the reason I'm saying this, I read in the paper that somebody, and I'm assuming it was you, and maybe I shouldn't assume, that the concept of zero waste is a folly. But let's go on to the rest of my comments, and I'll sit down and leave. There's another thing that disturbs me. Currently, this body owns a piece of property at the transfer station. It's more than a parcel of land that's sitting there. It's never going to be developed because you people don't have the resources to develop that. And I believe it should be sold to make up the deficits that your budget may have, so we can have some better programs. I think you should look at, have somebody, an appraiser, appraise that property out there and come up with a dollar amount so you know how much that piece of property is worth. I don't think you've got 2 cents of an idea what you may be sitting on.
Is it 5 acres?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 5 acres.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, Mr. Miles, I've taken note. We're going to look into reading this public resource code per your suggestion, and Ted will research this 5-acre parcel. I'm unaware of the APN number on this 5 that is separate and distinct. So if you can pull that APN number for me, and we can get an idea of what's involved here. This is the information I'm hearing for the first time, that there's a separate parcel which is owned by the Solid Waste Authority. So we'll check into that, unless you have some information now on it.
The parcel was purchased as part of the purchase of the transfer station property, and the area is designated heavy commercial, as opposed to the industrial zoning that pertains to the rest of the transfer station. The idea at the time was that this area might be developed for a resource recovery park. At the time that the transfer station was under development, there was nothing like the Eco Store, which has both opened and since closed, and there was not an opportunity to recycle reusable items, especially building materials, doors, windows, things like that. And so that was part of the planned development of the facility, and it was viewed as a subsequent phase. Once the Eco Store opened, there was certainly much less urgency, and in fact almost no desire from any party, because generally the attitude of the board and the staff has been, if there's a private job to be had, that generally private industry should be supported and encouraged. And so now that the Eco Store is closed, perhaps the board has a different idea about what might be done with that property. But regardless, it certainly serves a valuable buffer zone function between the transfer station, which at times can have noise and dust impacts, and by having a buffer between the transfer station and the mobile home park, which is immediately behind us, then it still continues to serve a purpose even as it is.
I'd like to get a consensus of the board to see if there's an interest in pulling this assessor parcel number up, getting a topo map on it, and having a look and see if the property is being used in an appropriate manner, or it can stay in its existing mode. Is there a consensus that this board wishes to discuss it at the next meeting?
Well, I think I asked for it over 2 years ago for an appraisal of what those properties are worth, and if we did happen to sell, what we need to do to make the deficit sometime at that point in the budget.
All right, do we have any other feedback? All right, so let's
Find out what the cost or what the value is.
All right, let's find out, get some information per Mr. Miles' suggestion, and let's pull the map out. I'd like to see if it is in fact 5 acres, and find out exactly its zoning, proper zoning, its appropriate zoning, and find out, let's get some more information on it, and maybe even pull some sales comps from the area for like properties, if we can do that.
Just out of respect, July is a very, very busy month.
Okay.
And so I honestly do not anticipate that I'll be able to complete this at this time, given the other items I'd be happy to discuss.
All right,
later in the
we'll
meeting.
discuss this, we'll get this on a future agenda. Since I'm hearing from it, it's a good suggestion. I think we should do this, and if it goes to September, are you all right with that, Mr. Miles? We bring this up at a September meeting because of our time constraints?
Or even in November or October.
Okay, we'll get on it. Thank you, Ted. All right, additional public comments, Mr. Lonsdale?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Bill Lonsdale, and I live in Crescent City. 2 items. First, to congratulate the chair on getting his voice back. I'm sure he's happy about that.
I'm getting there.
Second is to share and possibly embarrass Mr. Sparrow by telling him how wonderful I think it was that he had his crews out on Saturday to make up for the holiday pickup. It's one of the great things about our system here. We never lose a day. And I think it's wonderful the way they do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lonsdale. Any additional comments, Mr. Workshall? Thank you. Please identify your name and your community in which you live.
Grant Worskell, Smith River Alliance, and I just wanted to first acknowledge those of you sitting on other boards for the Board of Supervisors, Mike and Roger, and then City Council for your leadership earlier this week on the Smith River water quality issue with regard to the water license application. Thank you very much. It was pretty exciting to see both bodies so much in consensus. Is wonderful. And actually, in following up with Roger, there's another matter that I wanted to bring up, and it relates to the illegal dumping problem that we have here. And I was appreciating Roger for the commitment to nuisance abatement and illegal dumping. And, you know, we realized we have kind of a commitment to that in common. The Smith River Alliance over the last several years, and in part thanks to grants from the RAC, which Mike and other communities sit on, we do annual cleanups, principally in the National Recreation Area. And it amounts to tons, that's tons, thousands of pounds a year of illegally dumped trash. And the thing that caught my interest was in one of the previous articles talking about what types of incentives or opportunity there may be for carpet. And I will have to say, I am continually seeing carpet in these annual cleanups that we're doing. And the irony is, you know, on one hand, as particularly everybody in this room knows, you know, we're blessed to have a lot of public lands, and we actually pride ourselves very much in having great access. We don't want roads closed, we like them open. Every one of those roads is an opportunity, particularly the least traveled. You can go out there and you can illegally dump. So I just wanted to say, as a community member and as an organizer and partner with the Solid Waste Management Authority over the years on these cleanups, I would be very, very grateful for continued leadership on the part of the board and the staff to think creatively. How do we, because we are different than other counties in this way, we do have more public land, as we continually point out. How do we creatively create opportunities so that people will see it would be better to dump at a day that we've set up, a location, and maybe there's new ways of looking at this, but it really is a problem that we need to think about how to deal with. So I'm unable to attend all the meetings, but I'm very grateful for the time that you all are putting in addressing these problems, and as I've said before in previous testimony, grateful for the good work of staff. And if we can really set ourselves apart on this issue, we're not only honoring the public trust value of these public lands that are here in the county that we're really partners with, but we're getting ahead of a problem that costs us in many different ways. So thanks for thinking about that, and I'll be happy to follow up with Roger, you know, as we talk about how we can work together on some of these nuisance and illegal dumping problems.
Thank you, Mr. Workshop. And again, credit where it is deserved. I personally enjoy a very good working relationship with our code enforcement officer, Dave Mason, and our city code enforcement officer, Eric Taylor. And they're all too familiar with my communications and photos and what have you that I send them on a regular basis, because folks are calling into us areas, and they're the eyes and ears, excuse me, of the county. So when there's a problem, we communicate through channels, and it does get remedied. And I'm very pleased and very proud that we have that working relationship on both the city and the county level. So thank you for that recognition. Are there any additional public comments of this? John, would you like to come up?
I'm John Parmentier, a county resident. I have a written thing for us today. Sometimes we need to change the way we do things because it's the right thing to do. Crescent City used, I'm going to use a sewage example, not a solid waste, but Crescent City used to pump raw sewage directly into the ocean. Now we have a modern wastewater treatment plant. It cost a lot of money, but it was the right thing to do. Del Norte used to dump solid waste onto the bare ground at Tolowa Dunes. It caused huge pollution problems and then huge fines from the state. Now we have an entity to monitor the toxic waste. It costs a lot of money to do this. Solid waste management used to be as simple as where is a good out-of-the-way place to dump this stuff. Very utilitarian. But all of a sudden we have realized that the world is too crowded and there aren't really any places to hide a pile of trash. It will take not only more money to deal with waste problems from this point forward, but also a change in mindset. Recycling reduces the amount of waste going to the landfill. It also preserves resources, not only the raw materials that would otherwise be taken out of the loop, but also the fact that recycling uses less energy than producing. At a glance, it may look like recycling costs more money, but in the long term, it saves. Dumping is not managing. To manage waste requires thinking how we do things as well as public outreach and education. The SWMA has initiated separate programs to help properly dispose of batteries, dispose of medical sharps, to dispose of paint, and dispose of carpet. These programs cost time and money, but they are the right thing to do. These public meetings of the Solid Waste Management Authority have been consistently well attended for a long time, and the overwhelming majority of speakers are in support of maintaining strong recycling, outreach, and educational programs. As a board, you have repeatedly heard this mandate from the people. I understand the desire for a low-cost entity. The city and county could certainly use extra funding in other areas, and it is frustrating that the cost of doing business is so high. By the way, a 3-yard dumpster from Recology Del Norte costs $361 a month. A 3-yard dumpster from Recology Humboldt costs $427.56 per month. So dumpsters are actually, for businesses even, dumpsters are cheaper in Del Norte than they are in Humboldt. For those of you who would rather cut staff and services, well, I really don't think I've changed your opinion. But it is my hope that the board will keep its decisions in line with the will of the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parmentier. Are there any additional public comments at this time?
Catherine Murray, I'm a resident of the city and the county. I have attended many of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority meetings over the last year where the public has been respectful, offering intelligent, well-researched recommendations based on facts for what will assist the efficiency of running the JPA, which has only fallen on deaf ears. In reading the minutes of the 6/24 meeting, it is clear that there is a lacking of leadership and direction, and I lay that on your feet as the chair, Mr. Gitlin. I'm sorry to say this, but it's been very frustrating. You hear what our recommendations are, you've just heard it. I find it is ironic that this board chooses to extend the appointment of Ms. Wilson due to the complexity of the agency, yet some of you believe that the executive director and the program manager positions should be combined and contracted out to a private entity. If this is how the private sector operates, based on the minutes of this last meeting, I suggest that the landfill will come under closer scrutiny and the governmental agencies will choose to remain having our landfill at a higher risk level with the potential for fines in the future and costing this county untold thousands of dollars. I have a correction to the minutes. Mr. Sullivan was kind enough to apologize to me, not Ms. Henry. So I just want to make that correction. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Are there any additional comments at this time?
Elizabeth Henry, live in the county. I actually, Grant and John's comments kind of brought this up, so I thought I'd mention it because I've been doing a lot of reading on the Cal Recycle site, the state site, and there's some really interesting things there. And talk about carpet, which we now are taking care of because of extended product responsibility, and where people pay in when they buy carpet, and then they're able to return carpet. The producer picks it up. I guess we have a collection site, and we have one because we had a very active director who advocated through a statewide agency that we have that in a rural county as opposed to only urban. There's another program now, I don't know if you know, that in 2013, their mattress stewardship program was started. There was a state law passed, and we're one of 3 states, Connecticut and Rhode Island are the only other ones that have this kind of a law and a program. And unfortunately, there are very, very few sites right now, and there's nothing close by here. But there's a council that's been set up, and there are, so that's available. I can give you that information. But I think it's really important. This may be one of the bells or whistles Mr. Gitlin, that you're thinking about that we don't have time for, but I can't think of anything better for this county than getting rid of mattresses. I think other than carpet and TVs and refrigerators, that's something you find. I see it along Washington Boulevard, I see mattresses. So I would like to see us get involved in these kind of programs, and I think the only way we can do that is to have sufficient staff so they can investigate these programs, they can go to state meetings, they can advocate for this rural county so it can participate. So, thank you.
Additional comments?
Yes, hello, I'm Donna Thompson, and I live in the county. My husband and I are native Californians. We retired to this county 15 years ago. When I was working full-time most of my life, there was no time to observe government in action. It has been interesting to do so since retirement. On the whole, I see the City Council and the Board of Supervisors at least attempting, and for the most part succeeding, in looking after our community interests. While many times I do not agree on particular issues, I have no doubt that they, with the help of staff, are tending the store. I do not have that secure feeling when it comes to the Solid Waste Authority Board. I attended the dedication of the transfer station and have watched with interest as changes, improvements were made to comply with the state's increasing requirements for recycling and reducing what goes into the waste stream. I am disturbed about the direction this board has taken. As others have said, many people have been here saying to you, don't fix something that's not broken. I think you're breaking it rather than not fixing it. And the two things that have, or one thing particularly that has amazed me is that Mary Wilson, who does not apparently agree with the cost for businesses to pay for their garbage pickup, I don't think you're representing the whole community. And I really felt many times when you voted that you should be recusing yourself. I'm sorry, but it just seems that way to me. And I'm so upset with this whole thing. I'm wondering if we could just recall the board and get a new one that wouldn't be broken. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. Are there any additional public comments at this time?
Good afternoon. I'm Norma Williams, Chapter President of the Del Norte County Employees Association, SEIU. I'm also a resident of Del Norte County. And I just have a few things. I've been attending the last couple of meetings, obviously in support of both the union and non-union staff of the authority over the transfer station. I want to remind the board that you can't cut staff without eliminating specific responsibilities in the authority's work plan. I'm also concerned about what cutting of any staff in any direction that you take, what impact that would have on both the union and non-union members, as well as the community. I'm also concerned about 3 of your members' sudden drive to declare this a utility, rather as the joint powers authority that you are. I know that there is a law, AB 939, which shares the state and recycling funding laws. But my biggest concern is what funding would be jeopardized by your push to drive us backward into declaring it a utility. I'm also concerned as whether this could be legally done. Would it be private? Would it be public? At what cost to the community, to the city, as well as to the county? I think at this point, those are things that you really need to take a look at, and something that we would be also looking at, especially when it comes to our union members. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Are there additional public comments at this time?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Ralph Johansson. I'm a member of the county. I'd like to read as much as I can of a statement a little over 2 pages, as much as I can get in. I was concerned to learn that at the June 24th meeting, Board Member Sullivan characterized recycling as extracurricular stuff, and Chair Gitlin referred to recycling as bells and whistles. They have it exactly backward. Case in point, this month our household has changed our residential curbside pickup service. We've opted for the mini 20-gallon can instead of the 32-gallon can, thereby reducing our monthly bill from $25.44 to $20.34. The reason is simple. Over the past few months, I've noticed that the garbage can has consistently no longer been even half full, whereas now we can scarcely fit all of our recycling items into the 30-gallon can. This change has happened over the course of the last 7 years, as far as I know, since we moved to North County. Back then, most of our items went into the 30-gallon garbage can to be hauled off to Oregon at expense to ratepayers, and much less went into the recycling can. But gradually and almost imperceptibly to us, that ratio has been directly reversed. In response to these changes, I've seen many more mini garbage cans appear recently in our neighborhood. That change in cost is directly due to the efforts of authority staff, both to inform the community of and to make available an ever-increasing array of recycling opportunities. That has been incremental and extensive, as is easily documented in the history of recycling in this county over the past few years. It's obvious to me, and must be to any objective person, including members of this board, that staff has been doing a remarkably effective job in bringing about the conditions in which reduction in rates are feasible. Further actions of that nature will in all likelihood continue if the present setup remains in place. As to the short and long-term goals, when I look online at the list of the authority's designated tasks for the past year, I note first that most are mandated by federal and state regulation or contractual obligation, such as negotiated service contracts. As Commissioner Hawley has correctly noted, I don't see that there's a lot of social kinds of activities. They're real, tangible kinds of activities in the work plan. They're mostly utilities, close quote. They're not bells and whistles or extracurricular stuff, as said in referring to tasks that staff has set out in consultation with boards over the years to educate the community about the need for recycling and to make it possible to recycle more of the material in the waste stream.
Mr. Johansson, can I please have you wrap up your comments, please?
All right, I'd like to skip to the bottom. In conclusion, I'd hope that any workshops that you schedule to discuss goals and purposes provide ample opportunity for interested members of the public to sit around tables and have a productive exchange with commissioners and staff. I've experienced participating as a board member in other regions, and that is what has been done in workshops in these jurisdictions. We're, after all, those most directly concerned with the outcome of those discussions. We have the most direct experience to offer in considering likely effects of measures taken. We should not be restricted in that process to sound bites. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johansson. Are there additional public comments at this time?
My name is Janet Gilbert, and I've been attending meetings for most of this year. I feel that the public has weighed in loudly and clearly. We like the Solid Waste Authority. We like what they're doing. We like the recycling programs and the education. We like increasing the opportunities to recycle more. We recommend that we recycle more. We especially liked the private-public contract with the public servant overseeing the operations on a daily basis. we hear good reports in the paper, more and more hazardous waste, oils, and paints coming in and being recycled. This program is working. Yet, the public has been dismissed by this board. As to the recommendations, the public was accused by one board member to be activists and not really representative of the public at large. 4 out of 5 board members want to contract out the administrative position without presenting any cost-benefit analysis of such a measure to the public to let us see if this makes economic sense. Other members of the board want the Solid Waste Authority to be a utility and not an agency of social change. Americans make up less than 5% of our global population, yet we utilize over 25% of the Earth's resources. This is unsustainable, and increasingly so as developing nations want to emulate us. We are vehicles for social change, whether we choose to admit it or not. Everything we do defines us. We must reduce, reuse, repurpose, recycle. We must continue to lead in waste stream reduction and educational outreach. I ask this board to set aside its personal agendas and follow the recommendations the public has given you, namely to continue the public-private partnership with a public director, to continue expanding recycling opportunities and reducing the waste stream, to continue educating the public at large. I ask this board to support the public whom you serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any additional public comments at this time? Seeing that there are no additional public comments, we will close public comments, and we'll move on to the report from the Del Norte Solid Waste Task Force. Do we have someone from the Solid Waste Task Force to make a report? This is a discussion regarding the meeting of July 7th. You were there, Mr. Miles? You wish to make a report?
Our main task, and we're going to put it off, was to elect a new chair. Also, we took two actions. We accepted the resignation of the county's blight officer, and because Mr. Martell was missing, he missed over 4 meetings without an excuse. He's no longer on the task force, because our bylaw says you're only supposed to 2 meetings? Yeah, thanks, Mary. We also discussed our bylaws, and at our next meeting, Ted's going to bring what he can find, and we're going to go over our bylaws. And I think that's personally a good thing, because we need to straighten them and do that. Ted did give one of our most important tasks this year, and hopefully the task force will get it done before November, is the 5-year plan. And it's the task force job to do this for the county so it can be sent to the state. And hopefully we'll be as diligent on the 5-year plan as we were on the ordinances. That's my hope.
Thank you, Mr. Miles. Is there any comment from the board regarding the Solid Waste Task Force report of July 7th?
Yeah, it looks like it's online, and it is due by December 31st of this year, so.
Okay, we will move on to consent agenda items 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4. I'll open up the microphone, public comments on any of these items before the board takes action. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address consent agenda items only? 2.1, approve of minutes, special session. 2.2, approve minutes, regular session, June 11th. 2.3, acknowledge and file for calendar year 13-14 stormwater report submitted to the Del Norte County Transfer Station. And 2.4, acknowledge and file for the calendar year 13-14 stormwater report submitted to the Crescent City landfill. Is there anybody who wishes to?
I'll move to approve, but I do have a correction, as Ms. Murray pointed out, that the apology was to Ms. Murray, not to Ms. Henry, for rolling my eyes during comments. So
That's on 2 point, is it regular
2.1.
session? That's 2.1. Okay, so noted.
So that correction needs to be made in the minutes.
Okay. Again, does the, move to approve, do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, seconded by Commissioner Holly. And I'll again open it up to comments from the audience if they wish to address the consent agenda. Seeing no one wishes to make a comment, let's poll the vote. Karen?
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, we'll move to Director and Treasurer's Report. Agenda items 3.1, Acting Director's Report. Mr. Ward?
Yes, thank you, Chair Gitlin. So starting in July, we of course had rate changes that went into effect, and both Gasky and Klamath, the small volume transfer stations, are open an extra day each week. And so that increases our activities over the summer, and in response to, of course, the longer days and more people cleaning out their yards. On 18th of, going over some of the significant activities since our last regular meeting, on the 18th of June, the Del Norte County Auditor conducted another surprise cash count. Authority accounts matched the cash on hand to the penny. This marks the 4th time a surprise cash count has confirmed the authority's accounting practices in the past year, confirming that the additional fiscal controls I have developed with Treasurer Taylor appear to be effective, and that account clerk Lisa Babcock continues to perform well, and that we continue to appreciate the oversight of the County Auditor, Clinton Shad. Hambro WSG installed fencing adjacent to the hazardous waste building to store paints, and that was completed. Both scales at the Del Norte County Transfer Station are now certified with the Del Norte County Department of Weights and Measures. I did update our compliance for PCI, which is essentially confirming our ongoing protections for customer charge card information. I conducted quarterly gas monitoring at the Crescent City landfill. I changed all the customer rates in the computer program and worked with Merle Heltowski to change the signs at all of the transfer stations. Regarding personnel and staffing, I authorized account clerk Lisa Babcock to work out of class and serve as the authority's administrative assistant, and hired Lori Paulson as a temporary part-time account clerk to assist with some of the accounting tasks associated with fiscal year end. We have also a temporary part-time refuse site attendant, Erica Semenoff, returning to the staffing roster, whose work has been her work had been suspended through June. And during this period of transition, I've assumed all responsibilities for scheduling and personnel actions. Regarding finances and audits, staff are working on the additional accounts receivable and accounts payable reports due to the County Auditor's Office in association with the close of the fiscal year, and most of those activities will occur in the next 3 months. In July, the authority is also expected to submit reports related to post-employment benefits. Last year, Authority Treasurer Controller submitted these reports, and as he is on vacation through the 3rd week of July, I've begun to prepare this information, but these reports are also behind schedule. Regarding vendor contract management and oversight, at the June 24th meeting, the board... Yes?
I was wondering about, those reports for the county personnel needs regarding, I don't remember the name of them, but I think it's...
OPEB, other
OPEB.
post-employment benefits, yes.
So I know Mr. Taylor commented about that last year, and it was quite a large learning curve for him to get those reports done. I'm wondering if there's a way to possibly get some help doing those reports. I don't know if anybody...
Well, the help is part of the issue. The other issue is the time. I have a number of competing demands upon my schedule at this point, and while it's on the list, I'm getting to it as soon as I can. And even if I were to have additional help, unless they can run with the ball and actually do it.
Yeah, somebody can maybe pay for services on something like
At
that,
this-
that might be more beneficial.
Because that it does involve personnel data, I am not inclined particularly to.
Someone at the county, or?
I will continue to work with the county, but again, this is not something that I am happy to have Mr. Taylor do it, but since he's not around, I do not have a backup at this point.
And there's no one at the county that we could maybe hire their services to help?
For instance, where we're at with the county is I have additional questions. I asked for specific information. They got some of the information. It just requires follow-up. It requires, the people at the county have generally been very helpful, but it does take someone on our end to actually shepherd the process through.
And that person would be you, and your time constraints are.
That's correct.
Highly challenged right now.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, it's a dilemma, and it's something that needs to get answered, and we just have to do it in a time frame which is as open and expeditious as possible. So thank you for doing your best.
For the public's information, those are papers that talk about the liability that is going to be owed by this agency regarding their retirement benefits and the money that is set aside. And again, typically they're have been underfunded, and they are currently underfunded, but this law was passed in order to for agencies to have to take a look at the money set aside for retirements, so that there hopefully will be some there that people are counting on. And again, this report gives everybody an idea just what percentage are actually funded of employee retirements, and it's not very high.
And not to put you on the spot, Mr. Shad, I see you are here in the audience. Is there anything that you could care to add to this conversation to facilitate Mr. Ward's challenge at this time? And I say this I know you weren't prepared to make a statement, but again, it's on the fly, so I wondered if this, perhaps your office can be helpful in some additional way to...
When it comes to the OPEB figures and reporting, Mr. Ward did call me about that. We talked about it via email or phone call. That doesn't go through my office. That's a human resources risk management issue, so I directed him to speak with our human resources department. And as far as I know, that's where he's been speaking with.
Okay, it's being handled as expeditiously as possible at this time, and I realize, this board realizes that you're doing two jobs and appreciates that, and we'll do the best we can.
And certainly July is a heavy month where many of these things are due all at once, and there really is that, and so those issues really come to the fore.
Right, now you're continuing in your report.
I am, thank you, sir. So at the June 24th meeting, there was a request specifically that Recology Del Norte and Hambro WSG be asked to provide input regarding the short and long-term goals to be presented at the July 9th meeting today. And after discussing these issues and hearing from Mr. White that the timeline, and Mr. Sparrow, that the timeline was very short, these items were pulled from this agenda by the chair and the vice chair at the agenda setting meeting. Regarding compliance, I received a call from Huamua, the local enforcement agent for CalRecycle, indicating that it is time for our annual vegetation maintenance at the landfill and that a small area of erosion on the east side of the landfill mound needed grading. I've been trying to coordinate these activities with Rick Lockstead of the County Engineering Department when we were both exploring the potential for using a combine mower on the top deck to reduce the amount of time and rental expenses using goat mowers. We've also historically relied upon the equipment from the Del Norte Fire Safe Council and the Aller Camp crews to help with the weed whacking of the herringbone down drains, and have not yet submitted applications for that assistance, so that's behind schedule. Grading activities have been delayed as the school district had rented the track loader for several weeks that the authority rents to do the same grading work. As the exposed area was small and these are summer months when erosion issues do not tend to get worse, that grading has also been deferred. In summary, these regular maintenance activities are delayed currently, and we hope to make progress in the coming months. Regarding programs and policies, More than one commissioner has expressed interest in possibly changing the collection rates for residential and commercial customers under the Recology Del Norte collections contract. I want to make sure that commissioners know that such an item may be placed on any authority agenda, and the board could then vote to direct staff or a subcommittee of commissioners and staff at any meeting to begin negotiating with Recology Del Norte to propose a rate adjustment to address such concerns. Before such changes would go into effect, the board would have to adopt a change order and related rate ordinance. If this is a direction supported by board action, however, there is no need for further delay on such negotiations. Extra work duties precluded me from participating in either the point of distribution emergency preparedness training or the debris management training, and I've attached a flyer, offered by the Department of Emergency Services. Staff trainings with respect to FEMA requirements continue to be temporarily deferred. Though solid waste issues abound in the aftermath of most major disasters, the authority currently lacks staff capacities to engage in these ongoing trainings. Regarding concerns, the number and intensity of tasks and reports that are being deferred by staff are mounting, and several items on this agenda do not have a complete staff report, as there was not staff capacity and/or time available to do so. On the 30th of June, the Del Norte Triplicate published an opinion piece from Bob Berkowitz related to the authority and the theft of the safe and the missing money that had been discussed at previous meetings. Though much of this opinion piece related to the authority, most of the questions he raised in this piece related to the subsequent investigations by the Del Norte County Sheriff's Department. I consulted with the chair and vice chair regarding if there was interest and/or support for me drafting a response, or if this should be discussed at this meeting. And at that meeting, it was decided that most of Mr. Berkowitz's questions pertain to the investigations by the Sheriff's Department, and authority staff have fully cooperated with the Sheriff's Department on all aspects of their investigations into these matters. As far as authority staff is concerned, this is old news, and that all the thefts and missing money referred to in the article are well over a year old. Financial oversight by the current director, authority treasurer, county auditor, and external auditing firm appears adequate in that the authority has implemented a series of additional fiscal controls since the time of these incidents, and 4 separate surprise cash counts have demonstrated that the authority's accounting systems remain accurate to the penny. And the to-do list, as you can see, is getting longer, and there are more items that I anticipate to be done in the coming months, and I just see them continuing to appear here. So rather than continue to repeat those activities, I'll just summarize some of the big ones. Coming up, we of course are having the county fair July 31st through August 3rd. The Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority continues to be a proud sponsor of this vital community event, and it is one of our main annual face-to-face outreach opportunities. There is still on the to-do list an analysis of the small volume transfer stations in Klamath and Gasky, conducting personal inspections of used oil recycling locations, completing the OPEB reports for Bickmore, reconciling outstanding bad checks with the county auditor's department, stormwater reports for the transfer station and the Crescent City landfill, a fairly large semi-annual monitoring report going to the Regional Water Quality Control Board pertaining to the landfill. The electronic annual report on all of our recycling programs is also due to CalRecycle. And we need to order bottles, make arrangements, and prepare for water quality monitoring, a more expansive test that we talked about, constituent of concern monitoring, that occurs in August of this coming year. Then, of course, we also need to do the vegetative maintenance at the landfill. So that concludes the director's report. I'd be happy to answer any questions before moving on to the treasurer's report.
Commissioners, questions for Mr. Ward?
No, I was only thinking about some of the reports that are due in July. I don't know if you'll be able to complete those, but in any of the reports that have some kind of sanction, we'd kind of like to know, I think, what that sanction is.
I appreciate that sensitivity, and I have the same. In most cases, so long as we maintain good communications with the oversight agency, they do cut us some slack. So, for instance, the stormwater reports, if they were a little late, they could be probably up to a month late. The same thing for the semi-annual report. So at this point in time, my priority is probably going to shift to the fiscal reports pertaining to the fiscal year end and the OPEB benefits, because those are coming a little do with a little greater urgency than those other things. But your point is very well taken, and I would intend, before missing any deadline, to communicate with the agencies.
Thank you.
I'm wondering about
go
any
ahead,
of these
Ms.
jobs on here, like I'm looking at this, personally conduct inspections of certified oil recycling centers in Del Norte County as required under Cal Recycles Oil Payment Program. Could one of us do that?
Could one of you do that?
Yeah. Does it have to
I
be some?
could give you the forms. There is nobody, at this point in time, there's nobody else on our staff who understands the oil recycling program and what our responsibilities are. I am very hesitant to engage our board members in activities that really are staff responsibilities. It's a possibility, of course, but I would need direction from the board before we actually start saying to the state agencies, and completing this responsibility will be the commissioners.
Well, is there something on here that we can help with? Some work that's on here that we might be able to help out?
I appreciate the question, but probably the biggest thing would be to engage in a constructive way where we could get more technical staff hired quickly.
Yeah, I think if we were thinking about assisting in items, say, at the transfer station, in the office or something like that, we'd have union issues to deal with. So I don't know that we can step in a position that's ordinarily done by classified
Yeah, I
staff.
think last time we helped out at the fair.
yeah,
We helped find people to man the booth and took turns and those type of things.
That is a possibility, absolutely. The fair, like I said, is direct outreach, and there, just like any staff person, I would want to make sure that anybody working the booth was familiar with all of our programs and ready to answer questions. So, but July 31st through August 3rd, we will have a booth at the fair, and if anybody is interested in helping out with staffing that booth, we welcome them.
Yeah, last time, and I think the task force also helped out
A little bit.
a little bit, yeah.
So I think this is encouraging, and I personally would like to get involved in perhaps coming to the booth, and perhaps some of the other commissioners here can make some time during the fair time and devote some time to answer questions, meet customers, and such. So let's count on us getting involved in this outreach.
As we do the scheduling, I'd be happy to send you all an email to see when you might be available.
Yeah, and also, Mr. Ward, I do want to clarify what Mr. Hawley and I discussed with regard to certain media news articles about conjecture. There is no new information. The fact that almost $30,000 has gone missing is a fact. But until and when and if we have new evidence as to how to proceed, I'm not a fan of waving the newspaper around and saying and having discussions which essentially go nowhere. So that is the reason. I don't say it's old news. In a sense, it is old news, but it's very fresh in my mind that there are missing funds, and it stays in my mind, and it's forever there until we have resolution on that. So I just don't see that there's any new evidence or new information at this time to pursue. So I want to make that point clear in your director's report. Are there any additional comments from commissioners at this time? Otherwise, we will move on. Okay, having said that, I don't see Mr. Taylor here for 3.2, the Treasurer Controller's report.
I'd be happy to give a summary.
Okay, so please, if you would.
So the quick and dirty bottom line is that for this fiscal year, thus far, we have brought in $187,238.36 more than we have spent, and our current cash balance is $540,070. And those balances, of course, are important to cover the liabilities associated with the landfill.
Mr. Ward, excuse me, can you compare those figures with 1 year ago? The fact that we're $186,000 in the black for this point of the year.
We were also in the black last fiscal year, but I do not have that number immediately in front of me.
Okay, thank you very much. Any additional report on the controller report for 2014? Commissioners, any comments?
One last thing on the general treasurer's controller's report, which is we now have final estimates, final results of how our projections of revenues came in. And bottom line is that our authority service fee revenue projections were We brought in $6,692.87 more than our projections. And for our franchise fee projections, we were 2014 short of our projections. So the net result is that our revenue was up by 4,678 from what we had projected.
Okay, moving on to 3.3, claims approved by treasurer and director for June 2014. I'll refer to you again, Mr. Ward.
Yeah. Looking at the big pieces, we have, it's towards the end of the fiscal year, the various departments that we work with get all of their bills together. So we see more bills from the Community Development Department this time of the year, which is just fine. We sure appreciate their help. So that's one of the bills that was there. We paid Smith & Newell for the external audit for the fiscal year ending in 2013. Of course, the regular monthly payment to Hambro Waste Solutions Group. And then we did also pay the remainder of our annual permit fee to the State Water Resources Control Board. So those were the big items.
And the figures total up to not quite $210,000. Is that right? 209,936.99. That's what I'm seeing it adds up to.
Yep.
Okay. We'll move on to, unless any commissioners have any feedback on 3.3, we'll move on to 3.4, the monthly cash charge reports aging sheet. 3.4.
The biggest item here that's of course concern, well, first of all, I should mention that this report has been since updated. So for instance, indicated on here is that we had not received payment from Recology. That is listed on the 1 through 30 column has been paid. So that we're not more than a month in arrears there. There is continuing to be a larger amount outstanding for Redwood National and State Parks, and that's really not anybody's fault, but it is a combination of issues that they've changed the way that they pay their bills, and that we've had staffing turnover in the position that was trying to work out all of the computer details. And so hopefully we've resolved that issue at this point, and we should be receiving those funds shortly.
Well, I know, Mr. Ward, we had this conversation about Redwood Park's last meeting.
Yes, we did.
And I'm hearing very clearly you're telling me about computer problems, but I'm also seeing that another 30 days has gone by, and the total figure adds up to $11,312.29. That doesn't sound like it's a simple computer problem. It sounds like someone's dragging their feet.
Our administrative assistant is out on medical leave. It takes a little while to pick up the ball, especially when you have computer programs that have specific logins, and that there's a process by which you change the logins. So you need to have all of the right people there in order to get the person the access to the system, and then once they have access to the system, it takes a while for the payments to go through. I believe at this point we're very close to having this resolved, because of course we all treat it as a higher priority, but the staff turnover issue definitely slowed it down.
I'm going to ask our additional commissioners to check in. I'm looking at at least 10 claims that are, I'm going to guess, 120 days old. It's 90 plus days. So they're going on 120 days. These are all 3-digit numbers, and they're all several $100s. I'm counting, I believe, 10 of them in different amounts, and I see these names appearing every month. So I'm wondering, maybe this board needs to take a more proactive position.
Mr. Chair, I think we already developed a policy on this last year.
Go ahead.
There is a protocol that needs to, letters need to be sent out, and then I'm not sure exactly what the time frame is as to when it gets sent to small claims, or...
There are several things at play here. One of the larger ones is that we have instituted a policy for assessing interest for overdue accounts. And that really pivots on having all of our records updated in QuickBooks, because that's the mechanism by which those additional amounts are charged. And we're not yet at that point. Again, like I said, we've had a number of staffing challenges in this particular position. And while I certainly appreciate the efforts of refuse site attendant Keith Estes, who has served as our accounts receivable person, to be fair, he was hired as a refuse site attendant, so he's stepped up and done a good job in the circumstance, but it's something that we need a little bit more expertise on, and we've hired a temporary person to help us with these fiscal issues. So I hope to be making more progress in these next coming months, but that's the reason why they are the way they are.
Again, it disturbs me that I think our solid waste authority has become a bit of a soft touch with some people who are being not serious about paying their bills. There's 10 of them here, and I appreciate that everyone has a story on that. I'm wondering how this...
Well, some of them have, like, for instance, Lehman Property Management, their phone number has been disconnected. It continues on, they're no longer in business, they're not around, I've called. So there is a process by which we would write these things off.
Are they in business, are you saying?
Not.
Okay, so that needs to be written off then.
That's right, but there's an official process that we go through, because we don't lightly write off any outstanding debts.
All right.
And so we actually need somebody who understands the whole system and is engaged to that level before we can get to that point. And like I said, there is a learning process, and we have new staff.
Well, and again, I'm just going to share you my opinion. The collections company, they do take 50% of the debt, but then they get it. And I'm thinking this might be something this board needs to look into, of people who are using the authority as a soft touch. They're not paying their bills, and they're clearly 3 and 4 and sometimes 5 and 6 months behind. So I'm one who kind of takes this seriously, and would not like to see this list of 10 grow into 20 or more. So do any of the other commissioners have some interest, some feedback they'd like to share in how to collect these bad debts? Or is it something that we want to take action on? What's your mindset?
I would say follow the policies that we set in place already. Go through the protocol and send the letters if they haven't been sent out. I think it was 60 days, I think, is where they were supposed to get a letter. And at $11,000, I would counsel write a letter now. $11,000 is I'm 1885. I think we just, turn it into collections agency, go that route. But the $11,000, there should be a letter from council to Redwood National Park saying, pay your bill.
I don't think Redwood National Park is hesitating in any way about paying the bill. They're merely saying, in order for us to pay the bill, you need to be on our system. And they've changed their system, and we need to have the person on the system approved through the system, and it's taken some time.
As alarming as this is, and I've watched it over the months, it's a far shorter list than it used to be. I just want to acknowledge that it's gotten better, and I know that was partly a function of writing some things off, but it used to be several pages, and now it's a page and a quarter, so that's good news.
And let me clearly state, I share the board's concerns on all of these fronts, because it's money owed to the agency for services that we provided, and we should collect that money.
This to me is not an issue that should be going 30 days more with more excuses. So I'm of the opinion we should place this on the agenda for next month and actually have an aging sheet which shows the amount of time in question. Find out who is and who is not in business, and let's get to the bottom of this. And if letters need to go out, in this case, to the big one, Redwood National Park, from our county council, then I'm so totally in support of that letter going out. Someone needs to be motivated to fix these computer problems or whatever the problem is, get us on this list, and get us paid. This is our money. And when we go along with the excuses, another 30 days goes along. So I'm kind of serious about this thing, and I'd like to see an aging sheet put together. And I realize you have a lot on your plate, but somehow we need to get to the bottom of this and get some of these numbers eliminated from there, even though it's improved from what it was before, Mr. Holly, I'm aware of that. But as far as I'm concerned, when someone practices bad behavior and we don't confront it aggressively, the bad behavior continues.
We just had the temporary help hired last week or so?
Yes.
So hopefully that will be of some assistance in modifying that. Good.
Okay, let us move on. We're at 3.5 earned revenue comparisons, calendar year 12, 13, and 13, 14.
Yeah, I already reported on this. I'm
Okay,
sorry
so
I
we
jumped
got
the gun.
that. Okay, so let us move on to discussion, action items, landfill post-closure, no items to be discussed, collections, franchise discussion, possible action regarding draft criteria and policy for the allocation of authority-directed complimentary bin pills, including input from our city and county code enforcement officers. Mr. Ward, I'll let you start.
Yeah. So, thank you, Chair. And so the background on this is that under the contract between the authority and Recology Del Norte, we have negotiated a provision in that agreement that there are 20 authority-directed bin pulls that are under the contract, that there's not a separate charge for, that they are the authority's discretion to say where and how those bins are collected. One of those regular recipients of the authority's generosity is the Del Norte County Fair, and they've repeated their request. In fact, they've reduced their request based on a conversation I had with Director Hatfield, looking at, they had requested that we have 5 bin pulls, and they've reduced that to 3 bin pulls, which frees up 2 additional bin pulls for the authority to use sometime throughout the year. So I very much appreciate that modified request. And the staff's recommendation is to approve the allocation of 3 authority-directed bin pulls in support of the Del Norte County Fair, to ask that Hambro WSG consider waiving their disposal fees for these dumpsters in support of the Del Norte County Fair, and to consider, discuss, revise, and/or adopt the attached draft criteria and policy for the allocation of authority-directed complementary bin pulls. The request of Commissioner Sullivan did draft up a policy looking at the criteria that might be considered by the board in allocating these, and I deliberately tried to make it points of discussion rather than specific yes or no or hard or fast rules. And so just my first effort at this, and certainly these are the board's rules to follow, and so they're the board's to modify.
Well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. So the criteria that I put in here that one might consider as a starting point is: the following criteria shall be considered and/or discussed when the authority takes action directing complementary or directed bin pulls.
Actually, I'm sorry, I will interrupt you, sorry.
Okay.
Can we break this up? And, I mean, we got something here, I know that we've got the fair directors here. I would move that we approve item 1 and 2 and consider 3 just as a separate discussion item. Otherwise, we'll get into a full-blown discussion about that, and I think the other one's a pretty easy one, so I would move to approve the allocation of 3 authority-directed bin pulls to support of Del Norte County Fair. 2, ask that Hambro's Waste Solutions Group consider waiving their disposal fees for these dumpsters in support of the Del Norte County Fair.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, let's have, we'll go to board discussion. So we're going to do this 2 at a time then, and I understand that. So I'm going to open it up to the public on these 2 items. So those of you who wish to come up to the dais and discuss approval of the allocation of the 3 authority-directed bin pulls, and that is for the Del Norte County Fair, and that's down from 5. Original request was 5. And to ask Hambro Waste Management Systems to consider waiving their disposal fees for these dumpsters in support of the Del Norte County Fair. So is there anyone from the public who wishes to weigh in on this? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion.
Call the question.
Okay, and let's have a poll on this. Go ahead, Karen.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
And Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, so let's move on to...
Mr. Gitlin?
Yes.
Can we just acknowledge the efforts at the fair at reducing the number of bins? I appreciate that. We can use that elsewhere, and I thank you for your help.
And so, thank you for that reminder. The way the arithmetic comes up, and I think it's important to discuss why we're kind of micromanaging these dumpsters, which incidentally, whether it's a 3-meter or a 40-meter unit, it's the same price. It's free. We get 20 of them. But last year, during calendar year 2013, we were using them, and we found out in November that we had one dumpster available. And in my mind, I'm thinking, don't squander it, let's use it. And during a relatively rainy month, December being a rainy month in Del Norte County, we allocated that last dumpster to a county cleanup at Union Street and pulled off 4.5 tons of debris, trash, etc. during a rainy month of December. So we're trying to plan ahead, and based on the arithmetic here, it looks like we have about 6, and I'll even go 5 to 6 available dumpsters above and beyond the needs of the city and the county to which to allocate, and that's why the criteria are developed. So at this point, I'd like to move on to number 3, which is consider, discuss, revise, and adopt the attached draft criteria and policy for the allocation. I'd like to invite our county code enforcement officer, Dave Mason, up to the dais first, followed by the city code enforcement officer, Eric Taylor, for input on these criteria as to on what basis we should allocate these bins. Thank you, Mr. Mason.
Good afternoon. So, let me just take a look here. The criteria that Mr. Ward was suggesting goes pretty much hand in hand with what county staff came up with. And I can just read you a statement here that I've got prepared. It's that county staff received a request from the board to present opinions and input on criteria for the policy on the use of the bin pools included in the current contract. Staff's reviewed the issue and available information, which is the basis for the following. Normal charge for a 40 cubic yard bin provided by Recology Del Norte for 1 week is $1,304.05. This normal bin rental includes disposal and tipping fees for 6.25 tons at $142.24 per ton, or $889. Extra weight or bulky items in a bin result in additional charges. This is the rate for the general public. Current franchise got the 20 bins, which the board may use at its discretion. Without this provision, Solid Waste Board would have to pay Recology for the service, and if we subtract the amount for the waste disposal, because you don't charge yourself for your own waste, it would work out to about $415 a bin pool. Keeping in mind, there's no such thing as free. The cost of doing that is subsidized by the tipping fees and franchise rates paid by the other customers in the county. These bins are traditionally used to provide solid waste management disposal service at various local community events. Because these events benefit the community at large, it makes sense to use the bins subsidized by the community to remove the trash generated at those events. Currently, the bins, I wrote this back when it was 5, you just changed it to 3, but currently 5 bins at the fairground, 4 bins for the 4th of July celebration, 6 bins for the coastal cleanup, 1 bin for the household hazardous waste cleanup, which left 4 bins, now it's 6. Because the local climate and weather creates a narrow window of opportunity to perform outdoor activities, it does not make sense to allocate the remaining bins during months where inclement weather would preclude their full and proper use. And a fair and equal distribution in the community is desirable. It makes sense to distribute the bins throughout the community geographically. The main populated areas geographically served by the Solid Waste Board are, of course, Smith River, the unincorporated area adjacent to Crescent City, the incorporated city of Crescent City, and Klamath. There are within these areas various community organizations, neighborhood associations, nonprofit organizations, community service districts, 3 rancherias, and a reservation. When a bin is dropped off for a project, it must be monitored closely to keep it from becoming a public nuisance. An unattended trash bin will attract hazardous waste, overfilling, and dumping adjacent to the bin if it is full. Therefore, whoever is using the bin must provide security and supervision. Most community organizations and so forth, previously mentioned, can adequately monitor a bin during a short-term project.
Mr. Mason,
I'm almost
hit
done.
your, okay.
Let me finish.
Okay.
Therefore, staff recommends the remaining bins be advertised annually as available for use by community groups. during the spring and summer. Interested parties could apply to the board, submit their project for the board to approve or not. The board could then choose the applicant with the best planned use proposed, and the use of the bin would likely require release of liability and promise to obey the conditions set by the board to prevent creating a public nuisance. And because the bins are funded by the community at large, for the purpose of benefiting the community, staff does not recommend using the bins in a way that would benefit an individual private property owner, as this might constitute or be perceived as a gift of public funds.
Well put.
I'm hearing that. Let's go to board comments first and questions from commissioners to Mr. Mason.
I have no questions. My question was, what's your recommendation? And you answered it, and so thank you.
All right, so let's take a scenario, for instance. When a city or a county makes a request that seems to have a higher threshold of credibility. We need this. There's going to be a request from the city, no doubt, on helping clean out that awful condition on Front Street that was created by some people, okay? And we're no doubt going to answer that. But let's suppose we have someone who is an innocent victim of, or over a long period of time, has trash accumulated and it's blighting a neighborhood. And they're indigent, and many people are indigent. How does this community reach out with the bins allocated to help clean up the area so an entire area is not further stigmatized by one or two houses where you have hoarders? And you and I have discussed this at length, Dave, about certain houses in certain areas that are just plain eyesores. Now, we've got volunteers. We get it, no shortage of that. How can we address this during a calendar year where we've got 20 and we can get these things done?
I think the question you're asking is not how, but the how to decide which one would be qualifying for the assistance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the state solid waste board sets a real good guideline on that. They have grant funding that we have applied for and received in the past. We currently have one going. They have two types of grants. One is for an illegal dump site, and they mandate that the local agency using those funds attempt to recover the costs and penalize the person responsible. The other one is the solid waste farm and ranch grant, which says the opposite. This is for innocent victims of others' activities, typically ranch and farm property where people have driven down a ranch road and just created a solid waste dump and the property owners become aware of it. It's not what I would do with this gift from the community. And the funds from the state pay for the cleanup, and there's a whole bunch of criteria on that, but the property owner is not forced to pay back the money. Okay, and so when we apply for the grant, we have to specify, for example, Rowdy Creek Road, the Simpson timberlands. All along the creek, there's tons and tons of garbage been pitched over the side. Our current grant project is going to pay for that cleanup. And because Simpson didn't put the trash there, they've done everything they reasonably can to prevent it, they're entitled to those grant funds from the state, which come from tipping fees throughout the state. That's what funds that grant program. So I would suggest following the state model is for those that, for example, the drug houses and the meth addicts and so on that generate these huge mountains of trash through their criminal activity, not be given any assistance free of charge. Certainly you could assist the city or county enforcement officials clean up the mess, but then recover the cost on the back end by assessing it on the property taxes. As opposed to a property owner where trash just appeared in the middle of the night and here it is, thank you very much, have a bad day, then a condition like that would be more to benefit from that. Okay. It gets a little iffy when you get a family member that was a hoarder that passed away and now the heirs have it, but normally that comes with the real estate. And so to get free cleanup would be a windfall for them. So I'm inclined to say really you should clean that up. If you're going to get the property, you should clean it up.
And I'm only looking at results, Dave. There's a greater...
My main point is you want to be very careful not to,
I understand
to benefit or reward inappropriate behavior.
Okay. I understand that, but what I'm concerned with is that an area, because of bureaucracy, because of...
well, the bureaucracy doesn't put the trash there.
No, but bureaucracy may slow cleaning it up. there's a greater good to an area, and I'm not going to specify or stigmatize any one particular area, but you and I have been to many streets where we've seen, and the whole neighborhood suffers because of one or two houses that look awful. And I know I've had the same conversation with Mr. Taylor on this thing, and we want to get it cleaned up, and we want to do it expeditiously. So would you be open to the possibility of saying, when there is a need, if it's in the county, or when it's in the need, if it's in the city, to come out and assess the need and evaluate it accordingly, take it back to your department head and see if you could say, well, this is a deserving person, this is an individual, and they need some help, and they're indigent, and we want to get the area cleaned up. Would you be amenable to having an evaluation to okay that?
Well, obviously, I can't speak for the city, but in the county, I don't have any objection to evaluating any condition
So if I were to come
project.
to you and say there's a certain property on XYZ Street, I'm not going to mention any streets,
Be
come
more
on
than
by,
happy to
take a look at
evaluate
it,
Make a recommendation on a specific property, that's no problem.
and they're indigent, or they've inherited the property, they don't have the money to fix it, it stays blighted until something happens. And that is where I'm trying to get to this next level.
I can tell you that I've worked on projects in the past where the county didn't have the money to go in and hire a contractor and clean it. We did have enough money to pay for the bins. And so we worked out a deal with the hearing officer, worked out the deal, says, county will provide the bin, you provide the labor, we'll haul it off, the cost will go on the property taxes, which gives you 5-6 years to pay it. And if you don't pay it, then the tax collector will sell the property to get it.
That sounds like a reasonable
And
way to deal with this.
We've done that in the past. Now,
Okay.
if you're suggesting that the waste board make that available to the city and county, where we have a project that exceeds our abilities, and we can defer the costs or assess them later to the property taxes, then that makes perfect sense to me.
Okay, and again, I'm saying this because last year it was a hurry up, we got to get this one bin utilized, and you can understand that. But we don't want to get into the raining season, which is essentially November on.
And then cleanups on county-owned land, of course.
Well, as I said, there's a different threshold for when a county or when a municipality makes a request. They're held at a higher standard. Well, I shouldn't say higher standard, their credibility is much higher.
We have a lot of publicly owned land, and
Yeah.
so who's going to pay for the trash disposal on that? Ultimately, it's always the community because it's their land.
Mr. Gitlin, I was thinking that same thing too. You know that the city's been very aggressive over the last couple of years dealing with blighted properties. And I know that we have identified maybe 33 or so properties just in our 2 square mile area in the city that we're watching and trying to modify. And the question is, when you come to residential blight, you know, how do you choose which one gets this minimum number of, we only have 4 or 5 bins to deal with. And I guess you could multiply that many times probably with the size of the county.
Oh, yes.
So my inclination with this policy is we should really take the highest priority for public lands. I mean, this is public money. It seems to me that the clearest route for us is to dealing with cleaning up public lands. And so I would like to see that the wording in this more strongly reflect that as a highest priority.
So is that the start of a motion?
Wow, that was a long motion.
Well, before we make a motion, I'd like to hear from City Enforcement Officer Eric Taylor. So I'd like Mr. Taylor to come up and share his. Now, I imagine there may be some different issues because in the city, you're going to have more residences, more physical
Chair
homes.
Gitlin, could I interject something for the board's consideration?
Go.
While there are 20 bins that are paid for essentially each year under the collections contract, in addition, the board has the ability to direct a bin pull at any time, so long as it's paid for. And so the amount that we would pay for that bin pull would be the same that we pay for the collection of any of the bins at the transfer stations in Gaskia and Klamath. So it's $184.92 per bin pull. So while there are 20 free bin pulls per year, you can add to that number so long as you are willing to pay, or the board is willing to pay, an additional approximately $200 for each additional bin.
And I'm hearing you. I appreciate Mr. Hawley, Commissioner Hawley's comments that he wants to do this in the public lands, but you know, we're a community where people come into our community and we get a first impression, and when they start driving down certain streets and certain houses are eyesores, and there are quite a few of them without stigmatizing any one area, I think this is a much bigger problem than a public area. So that is where I want to utilize the contract we have with Recology to utilize these free, and I appreciate Mr. Mason saying nothing is free, but the allocated bins, so that we don't find ourselves at the end of the season with bins that are squandered. And I hope it's not just for public use. I hope it's for private use too. And again, on the ability to pay, I think we should give some leeway to our code enforcement officers in the city or in the county to help us make that decision on the board. And on that note, I'm going to go to you, Mr. Taylor, for your input on this subject.
I mean, I have to say, I kind of agree with Mr. Mason and Mr. Hawley have already put out there. I mean, they're public funds. Their highest priority should be to clean up public lands. We have other mechanisms for gaining compliance. Obviously, we have many different ways, avenues to do that for private property owners. And I understand what you're saying, and you have a good point too. Some people get to the point where they can't deal with it anymore, or they're indigent. But I would add, usually those situations didn't happen overnight. I mean, they usually took years to get to that point. And it sounds like Mr. Mason's already came up to have some solutions where they have somebody pay it back over time, and maybe that's a different discussion you guys would have. As far as providing free bids, I would encourage you to stay away from using that on private properties. As Mr. Mason, I think, was accurately pointed out, there's grant funding out there, and I don't know if there's something maybe this board would like to have some type of a local grant you could apply for. I don't know if that's a possibility. But it's personal responsibility too when it comes down to a lot of these. So.
Everything you're saying I agree with. The net result is, because of this, certain properties don't get cleaned up day after week after month after year after year after year. You know it, we've seen them. I've been in touch with you on a number of properties in the city that are just plain eyesores, and the neighbors call me. They call me because we've got a blight program. Can't you help us? It's pleading. We've been dealing with this a long time. Can't you help us? And then, of course, I communicate that to you. We've got a situation here, and I know you've been very resolute in dealing with this. We're trying to kind of draw a balance here in the county and the city.
A lot of that's resources. Not every situation can be solved by a free dumpster. I mean, obviously, we have just a multitude of different types of code violations. So not, even when we look at the city, not everything is really that hoarder situation where they just have tons of trash on a property. It could just be substandard conditions on a building. I mean, there's many different things. And like I said, we use different avenues. I think in this past couple of years, we've burned over 9 structures. I mean, there's different ways of cleaning it up. And we gain compliance from those property owners.
Commissioners, any additional comments for either Code Enforcement Officer Mason or Code Enforcement Officer Taylor on this subject?
One thing I would like to add, and I don't know if it is possible, big problem we have in the city as far as public property is mostly streets and sidewalks, where a lot of people like to drag out their mattresses and their furniture and their garbage. And of course, city crews, we're the ones, we go out and we clean it up. I don't know if there's any way of having maybe one kind of open dumpster, just a possibility to utilize that, not maybe just at one time where we're trying to fill a 40-yard dumpster, but maybe over a kind of extended period of time, because that's one of the biggest problems we face.
I guess I'm dealing with this on an ongoing basis but I see carpet hanging over the 9th Street skateboard hill. Someone dumped carpet there, and it's hard for me to look at that and not do something about it, throw it in the truck and get rid of it, even at my cost to go take it down to the dumpster, because it's such an iconic view, Pebble Beach Drive. And people are going there and they're looking out at this beautiful ocean. There's some carpet sitting there.
And we don't disagree. We went out there and cleaned it up, I guess, once, and then came back. And
I understand that. But do you understand the frustration of people who see this and see that the wheels of progress move slowly, and we have a lot of properties that stay blighted? And I'm trying to find a happy median point where we can get these areas cleaned up with the allotted dumpsters we have. So I'll defer to what the board wants to do. I'd like to see that the code enforcement officers and the jurisdictions thereof come out and examine private properties and see if there's justification to recommend some kind of an accommodation here. And therefore, the neighbors will be very appreciative. The neighborhood will improve, and without setting precedent, this board votes on whether we want to allocate one way or the other a particular dumpster, and for the city or the county. And I think it makes sense, but, you know, again, I'm going to defer to what my colleagues are going to say here, so.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion. And I'm going to tie in, and actually, I'm glad you're coming up, Mr. Mason. No, I'm going to make the motion, because we're going to get through this here at this point, but I'm going to use the criteria staff has recommended. Beach, river, and community cleanup events to which the public is invited, cleanup activities on public property. I will add to that criteria that public cleanup on public land should take the highest priority, especially based on the percentage of public land in the community. Support of high-profile community events open to the public that include both disposal and recycling and/or related outreach activities, coordinated cleanup activities on prioritized private properties that have been designated by the city, county, or other public agencies as blighted with accumulated solid waste, coordinated neighborhood cleanup events in cases where a specific written request is presented by the authority's board consideration, activities that have great potential to reduce solid waste related blight, reduce illegal disposal of solid or hazardous waste, or increase recycling or composting, the ability for the requesting party to pay for the disposal of each bin, and the remaining number of bins to be allocated each year. Mr. Mason, you had something else that you added in your recommendations.
He mentioned security and supervision, and that could be added on the second to last bullet. Requesting a party to pay for disposal and maintain security and supervision for each bin.
Okay, yeah.
I just had one other
Go ahead,
comment.
go ahead,
and-
Mr. Mason.
Because it kind of glossed over it. Ted reminded me when you talked about you could have as many pulls as you wanted, 185 a bin. The county has always paid the standard commercial rate. We don't get any discount, any price break, and the $14,500 that we have to work with goes real quick when you got to pay the full rate. Just want to mention that. If you want to add to your criteria for an enforcement action, some kind of discount would make the county's funds go a lot further. That's all.
All right, and I want to thank you, Mr. Mason and Mr. Taylor, for your input on this subject. Mr. Palazzo, thank you for, City Manager Palazzo, thank you for coming in. You and I have had a number of discussions on this. It's a very passionate item for me personally, and I want to commend the city and the county for doing yeoman's work in cleaning up what seems to be an unending problem. And there may be other areas in which we remedy this problem. But I'm hearing that we have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Sullivan, which are basically adopting their criteria on their 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Looks like there's 8 bullets there. Is that correct,
Well,
Mr.?
and then also cleanup of public lands was highest priority. I added Commissioner Hawley's recommendation on that.
All right, Karen, do you have that as an additional bullet? So there's 9 bullets which to adopt a criteria for the allocation of the bins in question.
Can we repeat?
Did we get a,
And now, do we have a second?
I'd be glad to second it. as I
Okay, so we
understand.
have a motion and we have a second. Well, I'd like to go to the public at this time if they wish to weigh in on this subject of this allocation of bins at this time. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to approach the dais and speak? Seeing none, we'll close public comments. We'll bring it back to the board for any further discussion.
I made this request at the last meeting, and the point was to make this objective. If people came through, that there's an objective process for anyone to be able to apply for this, but we do need to have, there's only 20 bins, so you've got to have you have to prioritize this stuff, so I would call the question at this point.
Okay, let's take the count on it.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
And Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, let's move on from there. And again, thank you, code enforcement officers, for your input. That takes us, we're moving into 7 General Solid Waste Authority matters, 7.1.
What happened to item 6?
I'm sorry, Karen, say again?
6.1?
I'm sorry, 6.1. Discussion and possible action regarding the potential acceptance of American Express cards at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. Ted, if you would.
Staff recommend that the board approve acceptance of American Express cards at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. This will not in any way increase any of our costs. It will simply allow us to accept one more credit card. So if approved by the board, we would be accepting Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and American Express.
So moved.
So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And is there anyone who wishes to opine from the public at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on. Call the question, please. Karen?
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes?
Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, we'll move on to General Solid Waste Authority matters. 7.1, discussion and possible action regarding the purposes of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority and the work plan for 14-15. Essentially, we're talking about developing a mission statement. Go ahead, Ted. You can introduce.
Well, this is actually a review of the purposes that are already in the adopted joint powers agreement between the city and the county that was forming. It was the first amended joint powers agreement, but essentially after having the super board comprised of the entire city council and the entire board of supervisors, at the conclusion of that, this revised first amended JPA agreement was adopted, and in that were these 6 purposes. And so these are the purposes of the agency, and certainly might be considered as informing the board as you consider the possibility of short and long-term goals. I'd be happy to review those if you'd like, but I presume that everybody has read them. In short, they are planning, siting, permitting, and constructing, maintaining, and providing gate attendance at the public disposal sites and transfer stations, preparing, planning, and implementing and reporting on programs under the Regional Agency Integrated Waste Management Plan, including programs related to used motor oil, oil filters, household hazardous waste, and other materials and products banned from mixed waste disposal. Defining and monitoring service standards for collections, both in the incorporated and unincorporated areas of the county, and the ability to grant franchises for waste hauling, collection, and processing mixed recyclable materials. Setting maximum rates to be charged for these services. Developing, adopting, and implementing ordinances to control and prosecute illegal dumping and blight in Del Norte County associated with solid waste accumulation and storage, and post-closure maintenance, monitoring, and reporting and remediation related to the Crescent City landfill. So those are the 6 main purposes of these agencies, of this agency, excuse me. And then following that, I have built on the work plan and work priorities that we review every 6 months. And this is a list of all of the activities currently as the authority staff responsibilities, either because they're mandated, they're described in the joint powers agreement, or there has been a board action dictating that these are a responsibility of staff. So summarizing, I did highlight those activities that have been deferred pending staff capacity or have been otherwise deferred. And so as you're looking through there, you probably notice those highlighted activities. I'd be happy to discuss them, but they are broken out in general into transfer station facilities and operations, Crescent City landfill post-closure maintenance, collections franchise and collection system management, reuse, recycling, and composting, education and public outreach, budget funding and fiscal oversight, recovery infrastructure and recycling market development, other responsibilities and activities, and then separated out at the end there, you see priority discretionary activities. Those activities, and it really should say for 14-15, apologize for that, I'll fix that. But those are discretionary activities, so you'll notice some of them, in fact, many of them have question marks beside them, or they are highlighted indicating that they've either been deferred or there are lower priority activities to be pursued as staff capacity is available. Once again, those are broken out into transfer station facilities and operations, collections franchise and collection system management, landfill closure and post-closure maintenance, education and public outreach, and legislation, ordinances, and plans and enforcement. Be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners?
I'd only say that I appreciate seeing this again. I don't think we can see this enough. I think the purposes and the work priorities in the absence of a comprehensive strategic plan provide us with some kind of a foundation on which to make decisions. Specifically, I think with work priorities, when you go through there, I don't want to beat this to death, but I didn't see a lot of the activities that were really permissive. It seemed like most of them were either mandated. We've already talked about that, I think, in prior meetings. But if we're going, and one of the, when we talk about this, the short and long-term goals, and I know that's the next item, I think all of us pretty much identified the need to move forward with the recruitment of a permanent director. But I think that some of us were interested in combining the positions, some of us were interested in having a standalone position. But I think in order to have a combined position, we have to take some things off the plate. We've already talked about that, and R3 has said we need to do that. So we need to look through this and see if we can find items sufficient to take off the plate so we can reasonably combine those positions. In the absence of the ability to do that, then it may create a whole different kind of decision-making. So it was interesting. I went over this more carefully, of course, prior to this meeting than I ever have before, and I just couldn't identify a lot of time-saving opportunities. But anyway, that's for us to decide.
Additional comments from the commissioners? You know, I'm looking at, Ted, looking at on the purpose, we've dealt with ordinances, and before E is developing, adopting, implementing ordinances and programs to control and prosecute illegal dumping. This authority has already rescinded a number of ordinances. It's currently going through the system now. So I'm saying is this at the pleasure of this, is it the wish of this authority to go get back into the ordinance business? I have to ask that question rhetorically to see if this is what we've already dealt with this. So if it's going to be part of our statement, do you want to continue to develop ordinances when they are in fact sometimes duplicative?
You know, we're still working with the ordinances we have until the county and the city respond with how they're doing. So I think it has to stay in there at this time until those are actually repealed.
And you really don't want to take anything out of the toolbox. You want to have that power in the future if you need to use it, as the authority possibly changes its colors and goes in a different direction.
Well, one example of an ordinance that is inextricably intertwined with what the authority does is enforcement of the collections franchise. So, for instance, this authority board issues essentially a monopoly contract to the collections contractor, that they get to be the only one to collect containerized garbage in the community. And so coupled with that is the ability to actually enforce that, which is done through an ordinance. Of course, exactly the details and the specifics of the ordinance is up to the discretion of the board.
You're talking about flow control now, is that right?
That's another aspect that could be addressed within ordinances, but Mr. Gastineau is correct. This is a tool within the toolbox, to be used or not at the discretion of the board. But part of the formation of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority by the city and the county is that the powers of the city and the county to enforce solid waste and recycling laws are allowed to be available to the authority board. There are also specific provisions that before any ordinance is adopted, it has to be approved separately by the city and the county. But the ability to adopt an ordinance still currently exists within the JPA.
Commissioners, or is there an action item you wish to develop at this time?
I really think that this was kind of an exercise to take a look. Commissioner Hawley had asked last time that we again take a look at the work priorities, and that having that background and refresher that we could move into some discussion in regards to goals. So I think we went over this earlier in the year, and I know I highlighted several different things. I don't know if we have to get into the detail of it right now, but it is a good exercise to look at all the different things that we have.
Thank you. Okay, we've discussed it. Is there an action item? Hearing none.
If there isn't any specific action by the board, then I will take that as consensus direction that this is a correct expression of the current board direction and priorities.
I don't know if I would quite agree with that. I would like to say we're in a vetting process right now of gathering and accumulating information. This is a work in progress. So I don't know if anything is set in cement at this time, other than the gathering of information and the processing thereof of that information. So I wouldn't go so far as to say anything. We are discussing it, and I think that's healthy and important, and we're listening to those who are speaking to us. And we as commissioners are doing our job to fill our cerebrums with as much information as possible on this highly complex technical issue. And the fact that there will be no action on that, I don't think says any message other than we're not ready to make a decision right now, and it may be premature. Now, unless commissioners have some additional comments or wish to make a motion for an action item, I'll entertain that, but in lieu of that, it's an information only.
Yeah, I think my interest in doing this again was to maybe think about a process through which, is it 7.3 where we talk about a special meeting? Maybe we go through these one by one and see what can be done with each one of these, and if in fact it's mandated or not, and see if there's enough time savings to move on. So,
well,
anyway,
Commissioner Hawley,
just
we're
a
going to get to 7.3 shortly.
But,
all right.
But I'm thinking what Ted's saying is that if there's no action, he continues to do his job as he's been doing in the last year, because this is a reflection of last year's job duties. So if you say, we are not going to do anything, we're still collecting information, and you don't want him to take the message that this is his job to do, is he supposed to stop doing his job right now until we get all the information?
Nope, that's not what I said. He's supposed to do the job that the authority authorizes him to do, but it doesn't belie the fact that we are in the process of gathering information. There has been no action item to adopt a motion to change that at this time. Now, that might change, Commissioner Gastineau. That might change in a matter of an upcoming meeting that we have, where we are finding out exactly what information is important, what is the priority. So I don't think it's a clear message of anything other than he continues to do the job that we're authorizing him to do. And that may change. So having said that.
Which includes most of these action items that are mandatory that he has to do throughout the year.
Well, I think it's an important discussion on that when we get to 7.3 about what will be discussed in our upcoming meeting. All right, so let's move on, and 7.2. Okay. Oh, you want public comments on this? We're taking no action on this. Okay, come up.
In reading through this, I agree there are a lot of mandatory items, and what concerns me are a lot of those items with that little question mark in front, the discretionary, where there's no time. And a lot of those really pertain to more of the vision of the authority, of those things other than what you're mandated and have to do, which are often reports and all. But there's a number of items which, like participating in the California Product Stewardship Council, advocating for legislative and regulatory initiatives, things that you shouldn't ignore and leave off. And this brings me to the point where a number of us are really distressed out in the audience, you may have not noticed, when all of a sudden find that board members are volunteering to do work for the director. I mean, that is so out of line when you don't have staff time to get duties done. You can't go to the board. I think what it's pointing to is you need another staff member. And I don't know how many times this board can sweep that under the rug. I mean, it just does not make sense. And I think it's starting to get beyond the ridiculous. So, I mean, it's fine to go and volunteer at the fair and all that. Sure, a lot of us would like to do that. But when it comes down to volunteering to fill out state reports, the board shouldn't be doing that. So I think you should stop everything, stop the music, and get back to the staffing items. Today you spent an hour or more on bins. Well, we sat here, and the important things are not going to be heard until way after 5, when many of us have other things that we would like to be doing, and so we keep forgetting the priority items. So anyway, I'm expressing my frustration, but could we have a very direct agenda item, either at this workshop or somewhere, where you address staffing and what you're going to do about it, and not put it off anymore? It's almost the anniversary of the previous director leaving in July. And what's happened? nothing. So, anyway, we're all very distressed about that out there in the audience, so I had to express that. Thank you.
Any additional public comments? And this is on 7.1.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Bill Lonsdale again. When I looked at this order of items for consideration, it occurred to me that 7.1 and 7.2 probably are not appropriate action items until after 7.3 has taken place. I'd make that recommendation. The other thing is, after the last special meeting, and you heard a lot of it today, I'm sensing a fairly broad feeling among the public that those present at that meeting were representing their own personal views or prejudices or animosities, whatever the characterization you want to use, rather than representing the interests of the jurisdiction they supposedly represented. So I think maybe in order to dispel that, and it's important to dispel that, your board may wish to adopt a process that was suggested, I believe, by Commissioner Hawley, and that is a building block approach, which goes back to the basic. What's the mission? Determine whether you want to change the mission statement as it appears in the JPA agreement, and if so, take those changes back to your jurisdictions and make sure that's where they want to go. And then go to the work plan, which was the agreed upon set of priorities for the staff and for the authority, and remove the items that you think are bells and whistles or unnecessary and that sort of thing, and submit that revised list back to your jurisdiction and see if they're on board on that. And if they're on board and what you proposed in the last meeting is the way they want to go for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lonsdale. Any additional public comments?
My name is Karen Rath. I would like to thank Elizabeth for expressing the frustration that a lot of us are feeling here in the audience. I think Commissioner Hawley stated it very well at the last meeting. The elephant in the room is the staffing situation. That's not being addressed. I sat here today and I listened to the list of things that need to be done that are not being able to get done because of the staffing situation. And again, you had the city representative, the county representative expressing what their opinions were, and yet Commissioner Gitlin, you insisted on arguing with them to get your own way. And it's a waste of time. And we're all sitting here coming to these meetings because we care. And yet it feels like this board is not able to get it together and take some action, get some staffing in there. Then things can start getting done. But we're getting more and more behind. Thank you.
Any additional comments? Okay, we'll go ahead.
Norma Williams. I have to agree with the previous speakers, especially the gentleman. My only comment is this, is that you can micromanage a thing to death until you ruin it. And right now, frustration that I'm seeing, what I have seen over the past several months that I've been attending these meetings, is that at least maybe 2, maybe 3 of you are on the verge of ruining it. And it would be a real shame if you did that, not only for the staff, who I feel has been doing an excellent job, being short-staffed as they are, and they need that staffing, and you are ignoring it to their detriment, but also to the detriment of the community, who, by the way, you're supposed to serve. You're not supposed to serve yourselves, regardless of your ideology, regardless of your political or your personal feelings. Put those aside for a change and think about every single one of us here and every single one of the people in the community. You're ignoring us and you're failing us.
I'd like to thank Commissioners Hawley and Gastineau for standing up for the staff, for Mr. Sullivan for finally cutting to the chase on the bin issue. And I'd like to point out to Mr. Gitlin that this 7.1 is not a mission statement, it's purpose, and mission statements are rather short. Thank you.
Any additional comments? We'll close public comments. I just want to make one quick comment. We're all frustrated. It's unfair to say that it's been a year since the previous director said when we have an R3 consulting report that was needed to be presented and we didn't get into our hands until April. It's a slow process, and the wheels of government do not move quickly. This is an area that's extremely complicated, and I appreciate the fact that many of you who come here meeting after meeting and have given us your opinion. You do not represent all of the community, you represent yourselves, and we do listen to you, and I do listen to you. Now, having said that, we're trying to move forward, and we need consensus. And these are not easily threaded needles. They have to move slowly, and it is frustrating. And unfortunately, the agenda is the agenda. And I appreciate the fact that Mr. Ward is overworked right now, and he is doing the job of two people. We'd like to move this forward, and we're going to have a workshop on this and move forward, but it cannot be rushed. It simply cannot be willy-nilly pushed forward. It has to be properly vetted. So I appreciate your patience as we deal with these complex issues, and know that we share your frustration. Now, having said that, let's go to 7.2, and discussion and possible action regarding long and short-term goals for the Del Norte Solid Waste Authority. Last week, Commissioner Gastineau, you were not here, and in your stead, your alternate, Rich Ania, gave his opinion, which is, with all due respect, not the one that matters, since you were not here. So I'm going to ask you at this time to do what all of the other commissioners have done, is to please give us your vision on long and short-term goals for the Del Norte Solid Waste Authority.
Well, yeah, I did go over the minutes, and it did seem that there was some meandering going on, and you guys weren't really staying the task of what we want the Solid Waste Management Authority to be. And it comes down to, really a simple process of what do we have to do the state stuff, the regulations, and monitoring the landfill. What are our current grant-funded programs that don't cost us anything besides storage and a little bit of transportation, are paid for through the grants? And then what we'd like to do concerning recycling, and you quoted other people's bells and whistles, and then there's our wish list. And we just go over that, just basically on a whiteboard, sit there and put those out, and then we sit there and assign what duties are assigned to current staff for each one of those, and we see the staffing levels. If we can't handle something, or if one of these current grant-funded programs runs out, maybe we don't reapply for it, and that's something that pulls back a little bit. The authority doesn't have to handle that process. The thing about recycling programs is that they actually save people money. You don't have to pay the tipping fees to take all that carpet in there if we have a carpet. That saves contractors when they do remodels or they are fixing up a house after a fire. It helps businesses reduce their waste. The great letter from Mr. Johansson about how he now has a larger recycling bin than he has a garbage bin. And that saves us on transportation costs from here to White City. So those are economic builders and developing things that we could help educate our community to go that route and fix it up. My main thing is that we figure out what we want to do with the authority and what we have to do. We get a director in there that runs the place and develops the staffing. That's all I have to say about that, is we need a strong director to take the authority in. And as a board, we set policy, and we shouldn't be micromanaging how it's run. It should run smoothly with us giving a little bit of policy of where we want it to go. So that, my opinion, is we do need a strong director, and we should look in that direction. Once we figure out what we want to do, what we have to do, then we have the means for our goals into the future, and also for what a director, what duties they want to take on and what we want them to take on, and then they staff it accordingly to make sure that we get the work done.
So your comment was one short-term goal only, and I want to, which was hire the director. I just want to review, because we did take some notes. Commissioner Wilson, you also indicated, I believe, you actually selected an option. You wanted someone who has a financial analyst, and then you opted to discuss option number 3. Is that correct? I mean, I've taken notes from that, so do you have a choice on an option from the R3 report?
You know what? The R3 report was a good report, and we don't have to follow it. We don't have to take their options. We want to figure out what we want the Solid Waste Management Authority to be for our community. And if we figure that out, we have our short and long-term goals of how we want to continue on with solid waste management in Del Norte County.
Can I talk about that? And what I'm really hearing from you is, I thought about our discussion last time, and I came to the exact same conclusion that Mr. Longsdale did. And basically, I think that, we're at odds because we have different missions or a different vision. And so in thinking about a mission statement, I think that if we were to agree on what a mission statement for this board would be, that you set that first, and then from that come the goals, because you've decided what you want to do, and then your goals, and then after your goals it becomes your strategy on how you're going to meet those goals. And so basically I think that that's kind of where we've been at odds with, and that's exactly, I came to the same conclusion Mr. Longsdale did, that we need to agree on a mission statement. I wish Pat Black were here, because she had so beautifully stated one here a couple of meetings ago. Unfortunately, I did not have time to go back and review what she felt that our mission should be for this authority. I did go online and I looked at several other solid waste authorities and looked at their mission statements, and I thought that there were some really good ideas. And since we're in this part of our 7.2 short and long-term goals, I would wonder if everyone would be open to taking a look at some of the mission statements. And do we currently have a mission statement?
No.
No.
The closest that comes is the statement of purpose.
Purpose. So again, I think that's what you were saying.
That is along the lines, because we have to figure out exactly what we have to do and what we want to do, and
Right.
that is the mission of the Solid Waste Management Authority. And, to put it in a nice pretty package as a mission statement is just another thing of figuring out what we want to do.
Right. So basically, whether it's to, I came up with a few here, and I certainly made extra copies to pass these out. There were some really nice ones done by other counties, I don't know if this would be the time to pass them off right now.
And not to cut you short, Mary, but this would be a perfect topic for our special meeting coming up at the end of the month. Right now.
All right, let's do this, because it is, the hour is growing late and we want to move forward. I just want to coalesce that which all 5 of us have weighed in on, and today you did so, Commissioner Gastineau. Commissioner Sullivan, you also prioritized executive director. You also selected option 3 with a strong financial background, and you stated that you wish to see the vision of the Del Norte Solid Waste as utility, and has that changed?
Nope.
Okay. Commissioner Hawley, your position was, from what I'm getting and writing my notes, is create the executive director is the short-term goal, and that was basically your statement. You indicated no option, and I just want to kind of review that which you said, and I want to know if you want to add to it anything additional, because we've had an opportunity to process this.
Right, and it's helped processing it. I think my interest last time was to, in fact, it still is, to do what we have to do with strategic planning in order to get an executive director. It may not be the total scheme that someone does with strategic planning, but we need to do that work that we need to do to get an executive director, and he or she can then shepherd the rest of the process. That was my interest.
Okay, and I'm going to weigh in again on I have been out an opportunity to process that which I said, and I actually opined for option 4 to move toward further privatization. But I'm seeing that, to me, option 3, which is the contract employee and the merging of the two positions is one in which I could adopt, or some kind of a hybrid version of that. Now, that being said, I'm having a difficult time wanting to go and recruit an executive director without a clear mission statement. What is my job? He's going to come in and, what do you want me to do? And at this juncture, on this day, on July 9th, we don't have that clear, and that's why it's very difficult. And I know all of you are sitting in the audience and watching on television, you're saying, well, get it. Not so easy. It's a process. And we have 5 very different personalities up here, all with different opinions on this, trying to come to a consensus. And so that there's a consensus on there, nothing happens unless there are 3 votes to do something, and has to include 1 city and 1 county vote. Nothing happens, no change takes place. So I appreciate the audience when they say, get to it, we want it. We are. And that's why we're conducting these special meetings, and that's why we're getting as much information as we can, and that is a process that takes time. It cannot be rushed. All right, so no one has any additional information that they wish to share with the public or the board at this time. And Commissioner Gastineau, thank you for sharing with us what your vision is on at least the short-term goal for at this time. So that having been said, I'm looking at no action ready to be taken at this point. At this point, we're still in the process of gathering information. I'll ask, again, public, if you wish to come up and talk on it. This is the hour's late, but I want to give you an opportunity.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, can I jump in on this? And I do agree the public's got to give comment on this also, but I would tie this into 7.3. I think Commissioner Gastineau brought that up.
Okay, so
and if I can formally request that we have a professional facilitator at that meeting too, so we can get through and get this stuff done, I would greatly appreciate that. So
and the
we can keep them on our
whiteboard,
mission
talking
statement.
about putting those that are mandated, those that are optional, et cetera. You want something, and I completely agree with that. Council, would you need a motion on that, on the suggestion, or I guess it is a motion, by Commissioner Sullivan? Or
That was not a motion, that was a request.
Okay,
That was a
so
request of the
do we have board
chair
consensus on this?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay, all right. So we have board consensus, and we'll move forward. Now, on 7.3.
Well, you got to get
Okay,
public
hold on,
comment
hold
at
on,
this
go ahead.
point.
Yes, Mr. Hall, Commissioner Hall.
I'm sorry to jump in, but am I to understand that Mr. Ward has been directed to find a facilitator for our next meeting, strategic planning meeting, and we should probably give him a ceiling or some kind of a budget to work with in order to locate that person?
And I appreciate that, and as you know, this board, this authority has been loath to spend any extra money after having expended somewhere in the neighborhood of, what, $30,000+ on the R3 report. I want to keep that budget modest, and it should be on an hourly basis. But I think it is important, and money must be spent so a professional can walk this board through this, and it makes sense to do it that way. So we would have to find someone to identify the issues and walk us through this and put on the mandated items and the optional items on the board so the meeting can be productive.
What's a reasonable amount of money for that? 500?
We're talking about
500?
basically a 2-hour meeting when we have this.
I guess $300 to $500.
Yeah, let's,
At least.
okay. So we will need, that's a money issue, so we will need a motion of up to $500. Is that the motion you would like to introduce, Commissioner Sullivan? To spend up to $500 for a facilitator?
I think the director has the ability to expend up to, as long as he's given direction by the board, he's got that authority. I mean, I think the amount is you can spend up to $5,000 as director, so.
What's the pleasure of this board?
I would fully expect that a professional strategic planner would cost at least $2,000. I'm just being realistic.
This isn't a school district budget.
Well, or the counties.
Yeah.
Maybe we could authorize Ted to seek a person up to that amount.
I would actually the exec committee with the director can get together and
Okay.
I'd be comfortable as long as we're not exceeding what the director is authorized to spend up to that limit. So I'm good with going forward on that.
And were you asking for a moderator or for a strategic planner?
Facilitator.
You said strategic planner? Is that-
Yeah, I think there's a difference. Do we expect
Yes,
a
there's
report
two.
to be generated, or do we want somebody just to run the meeting? Which?
Okay, I'm good with the strategic planner.
With something more than just moderation.
All right, we're kind
Okay.
of somersaulting into 7.3 with regard to this meeting. So we're essentially talking about 7.3 right now, which is discussion and action regarding setting a date to have this facilitator, this moderator, this strategic planner, call it what you will, to carry us through this meeting. I have been frankly loath to spend extra money, but this apparently is a necessity that I can see there's a need for. So we're talking about setting a date in the neighborhood of August 14th to 21st. I know we
Mr.
have-
Chair, I did consult with Tony regarding the availability of the chambers, and on August 18th, it is available up until 4 p.m. On August 19th, it's available between 1 and 4:30, and it's open on August 21st and 22nd.
All right, so let's, I appreciate the commissioners looking at their calendars. What were the dates again?
August 18th, up until 4 p.m. August 19th, between 1 and 4:30, and time is available at the board's discretion on the 21st
And what day,
and the 22nd.
what day of the week is August 18th?
It's Monday.
Monday. So this is a Monday.
Yeah, we have a city council meeting.
Tuesday. If I'm not mistaken, that's a Board of Supervisors meeting on that date. That's the second Tuesday. That's third, no, that's third, I'm sorry. And then Wednesday is what?
No, 21st is Thursday.
Okay, so we skipped it. So it's
Yeah,
Thursday.
Wednesday's not available.
20, is not available? Okay, and Friday?
Thursday and Friday are available.
And I'm not available on the 22nd.
Okay. Repeat, so I'm hearing this correctly, Mr. Ward. Thursday, the 21st, is not available.
It is available all day.
Okay, yes. And I'm hearing that everyone is available so far. When we're moving to the 22nd, I'm now hearing that Commissioner Holly is not available. Is that correct? Okay, so we're looking at 3 dates. August 18th, the 19th, and the 21st, in time frames up to 4 p.m., and I would put a 2-hour window on this, so essentially a 2 to 4 p.m., or even a 1:30 to time frame on that with the 18th. That's Monday. Tuesday is the 19th, again, up to 1:40 in the afternoon. Is that what you said? On the 19th?
19th, 1 to
Board of
4:30.
Supervisors.
Between
Okay.
1 p.m. and 4:30 p.m.
All right, 1 to 4:30, and that, what, is that the, I don't have my calendar with me at this point.
That is Tuesday.
Is that a second Tuesday?
It is a third Tuesday.
That is no Board of Supervisors meeting on the third Tuesday.
Yeah, I think it's important to get enough hours in. If we're going to hire a strategic planner and he or she may be traveling, we're going to want to put as many hours as we can in on the special meeting.
Say the 21st?
21st looks best to me.
That's best for me, too.
And that would be
Yeah.
Thursday?
You do?
Yeah, I can go
Commissioner Wilson?
2 to 5 or
2 to 6?
2 to
2 to
11.
5, really?
2 to 11.
2 to
Yeah,
2:30?
two.
Whatever.
Okay.
Make it a
and
camping expedition. We'll do 8
Sure.
to 5 or something like that.
So we essentially want to do it after the noon hour, so make it in a 2 p.m. area.
Starting at 2 p.m.?
At 2 p.m. and without putting a closing figure. I think the issue becomes anything more than 2-3 hours. I can feel the dread from the audience saying, we need to, you lose your focus, you lose your concentration. So I'd like to shoot.
I agree.
For a 2, I can appreciate that. I'd like to shoot for a 2-hour window, and if it goes a little longer, so be it. But at 2 p.m. Thursday, the 21st, for this strategic workshop. Now, the question is, Mr. Ward, can you get the facilitator, the moderator, this individual who can walk us through. Can you make that inquiry, or was that something we need
I
to do?
promise I will do my best, but honestly, I have no idea.
Okay. Just a second.
Reach
Just a second.
out
We
to
wanna
other
reach out
agencies.
Before we open comments.
Well, I think what my request was that the executive committee meet with the director to decide on some individuals, because we're going to need somebody pretty neutral in that role, so.
So that would be necessary in a pre-agenda, kind of in a pre-agenda meeting well before the fact. So Mr. Holly, you and I will meet, and we'll need to come up with some individuals who are.
Well, I worked with some people from Humboldt County, and, you know, we can look at that.
Absolutely. Any suggestions that any commissioner has, please email them to me, and I'll pursue all leads.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, now, come on.
Elizabeth Henry from the county. I just wondered how you see the public participating. I think it's really important that a facilitator not only hear from you, but hear from the public, the community. So I'd like to know that. Another suggestion would be, why meet here? Why not find a more comfortable place? First of all, the air conditioning is just horrible here. We're all freezing. It's not a very, I don't think it's a conducive a place for an exchange of ideas. Is there another place where you could have tables and people could sit in more of a workshop situation?
Well, let me just share this with you. First of all, we have audio-visual here, and that's important since our meetings are telecast. So we have the hookups here. There is the possibility we can go to the firehouse. The acoustics are not very good over there. You've been there, and it's very difficult to hear. It's hard. The acoustics bounce off the walls. This is about as good as it gets right here. So I don't know if there's
Does
another
every
suggestion.
meeting have to be televised?
Yeah, that was the question I had.
Because on the Board of Supervisors, we used to have workshops all over the place, and, you know, I think you need to, when you're making decisions, that you need to have the
Council
public.
Rice,
I don't know.
What's the position on televising the audiovisual on our meetings?
There's no requirement.
So there is no requirement. We can meet at another location.
Yes.
And
The other thing is people might come, you know, if you're not going to have it on TV, you be there, you see, you know what's going on, you know, it might be an invitation for people to come. It's just a suggestion.
So that helps us with meeting rooms if we don't have to get it.
Yeah, and then you don't have the
So
problem.
the location is the issue, but the time frame at this point, the date is August 21st at 2 o'clock.
If I might, just based on the tone of the conversation and the number of things to be decided, and that we will have a meeting on August 13th, that perhaps we might include this on the agenda for that meeting, that we could flesh out some of these details.
Well, by that time, I would hope that we would have someone lined up at that point.
Of course.
So, Mr. Ward, Commissioner Holly and you and I will meet, I'm not quite sure when, very soon, and we'll vet some possible individuals who can moderate, be the strategist or whatever that word is that you're looking, who will walk us through this process of the single item issue. Okay. Were there any additional public comments? Okay, then I'll close that up and move on to 7.4.
Move to approve.
Okay, this is a discussion, possible approval of budget. The amount in question was not ascertained. It is $18,844. Is that correct, Mr. Ward? Go ahead.
I believe you all have a copy in front of you. Essentially, these are the budget revisions that are necessary as we approach the end of the fiscal year to address budget items that had been overdrawn and were in deficit. There probably will be one more to close out the fiscal year, but this will.
And we have the sheet of what that involves in. Okay,
Yes.
we have a motion to approve. Is there
I'll
a second?
second.
And seconded by Commissioner Wilson. Let's call the question.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Holly?
Yes?
Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, and 7.5, discussion, possible action regarding Resolution 2014-15, authorizing submittal of a regional used oil payment program application as the regional lead agency, related authorization and identification of regional participants in submittal of related application.
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion moved to approve.
Second.
And seconded by Commissioner Holly?
Actually, Mr. Gastineau was louder.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Gastineau. And I don't see anybody in the audience anymore, so any board discussion? Okay, we'll call the question, please, Karen.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, now, we do have a closed session item at this point.
Mr. Chair, I do have a formal request for the next meeting, is that the agenda action items are moved to the beginning of the agenda, not at the end.
Okay, Ted, if you would, please.
So when you redo it, I think consent agenda has to be towards the beginning as well as public comment, but other than that, action items can be moved to the front.
Okay, and if not, that being said, I'll take it out of sequence. These things sometimes go a little lengthier than we want, and we have to have the public have what they have to say, and I understand that. So we'll move forward on that for the next meeting. Now, are we going into closed session, Mr. Ward? Okay.
Are you anticipating any action coming out of the closed session?
No.
Okay, I will close up.